It's time to get inside the Giants huddle.
Huddle up.
On Giants.com.
Here we go.
And the Giants mobile
Get
app.
them in there. Let's go.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Welcome to another episode of the Giants Huddle Podcast. I'm John Schmeelk. It's all brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit PSEG.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. All right, everybody, our normal Friday fare this week. Bob Papa sits down with head coach of the Giants, Brian Daboll. A Jaguars preview. Lance Medow and Paul Dottino talk to Mike DiRocco, who covers the Jaguars for ESPN. And we'll lead off with my sit-down with Giants safety Xavier McKinney. Just a reminder, though, to go back, check out our last Giants Huddle episode. That was with Steve Palazzolo. And go find the Giants Huddle and subscribe whenever you can on your favorite podcast platforms. Or, again, you can listen at Giants.com/podcast or the Giants mobile app. Same deal. We just published on Thursday our newest draft season as we continue to track college football, who the emerging players are, kind of tracking what this draft class is going to look like in every couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. Myself, Tony Pauline, Eric Crocker break down what's happening in college football as we try to track the draft and don't just kind of jump in deep end of the pool in January. Try to have a little bit of a baseline as we head into the offseason. We get into draft season here. So, again, find draft season on the Giants app, podcast platforms everywhere. Just search for draft season or go to Giants.com/podcast, and the links to subscribe are there as well. All right, let's get to it. We'll lead off with my interview with Giants safety Xavier McKinney. And now we're joined by Giants safety Xavier McKinney. Zay, good to be with you, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, dude. So you're 5-1. I'm going to ask you a really simple question, but I think the answer's complicated. How have you guys gotten to 5-1? What do you think you guys are doing well that's helped you get there?
Well, I think, just the bond that we've created within each other from the very beginning, back in OTAs it started. But we've always had a tight-knit group. Even the last 2 years, the 2 years that I've been here, our group has always been really close. Offense, defense, offense. So it's nothing new, man. We just have continued to build relationships with each other. And, at the end of the day, we go out there and play for each other, and we know that we have each other's backs.
So maybe you already answered the question then, as my follow-up was going to be, is there like a secret sauce to winning all these close games? Every game you've been in has been a one-score game. You're 5-1.
Nah, everybody likes each other, man. I think, when you got a team full of guys that, are all selfless, guys that, want to, be better for the person next to them, for the guy that they're playing next to. Obviously, it creates a great sense of just a team. It builds a great team, and I think we have that with a lot of our guys, and I think that's why it's been so successful for us to this point.
And is there a momentum now to stuff like this where you see the results and it reinforces your confidence, where it helps it keep on rolling when you start putting some of these wins together?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely, obviously, when you put in the work, how we do, and then you obviously go out there and the results come back and, they're winning results. Obviously, it's always going to boost your confidence. It's going to make you feel, more confident in your ability and make you play a lot better and make you want even more than what you have. So I think that's what we have in our guys is, we're winning these games, but not just the result of it, but just throughout the whole process of, how we prepare, how we go out here and practice, and just the things we do that's outside of the building with each other. It's building everybody's confidence, and we all trust each other. And when you got trust, you got everything. So I think you can really tell when we're out there playing.
All right, let's dig into more of the X's and O's, and I'll ask another simple, basic question. What makes Wink's defense work? Why is it effective?
Just being able to, put guys in different spots, being able to switch it up, show people different looks. Obviously, everybody is, he's aggressive, but at the same time, he listens. And, I think for there to be a great leader, you also have to be willing to, be able to grow and listen to, the people around you. So, he's not, one-sided. He doesn't just close off to everything else. He's always going to do what's best, for our defense and what's going to put us in the best situation to be able to go out there and execute on defense and be able to get stops when we need to. So I think that's the biggest thing about, playing in his defense. And I think that's been the most fun part too about it as well.
It's funny. You mentioned three things there, and there was all three things that I was going to kind of follow up on. So I want to go one at a time here. You mentioned how he listens. I had Dexter on last week, and he said, a big reason that we're improving in the second halves of games and as you go along in these games is that he'll take player input during the game and then adjust what he's doing from what you guys are seeing on the field. And he talked to me about some of the stuff he sees that he communicates. What are some of the types of things, without giving away state secrets, that you can see from your kind of bird's eye view safety position that you can communicate to him and the other coaches during the game that can help with some of those adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, we have these talks a lot of the times during the game, just because obviously I'm the one with the green dot and saying the plays, and so obviously I get to see kind of what's working for us, and or if I feel like we need to run something that I feel like can work for us, then I obviously express that to him, and he does the same with me as well. He'll come up to me and ask me what I think we should run, or what I feel like is going to work for us, or even sometimes what I want to run, and we go from there. So, like I said, man, I think all the coaches have done a great job of just providing that transparency within all of us, and it's really helped us a lot, and it's helped us grow throughout these games.
Zay, and you mentioned, and I want to get to the green dot in a second, but you mentioned how everyone thinks Wink's aggressive. And I think that was the impression coming in. But I've been pretty impressed while, the blitz rate, if you look at the numbers, is high. But I feel like he's been very measured in how he uses them, right? It's not like he's throwing you guys in cover zero all over the place and putting guys out on islands. He's running zone behind it sometimes. He's keeping guys in front. It seems like he's very methodical in how he uses the blitzes. And while it's aggressive, it's also it's not putting you guys out on islands and putting your defense in danger, which is one of the reasons you're not giving up a lot of big plays.
Yeah, man. Like I said, that's like, he's a great defensive coordinator. He's not, like I said, he's not one of them guys that's just gonna be like, yeah, this is just what I do, and I don't want to do nothing else. Like, nah, he's gonna do what's best, for us. He's not gonna. Obviously, there's some times where it's like, all right, we know what we're gonna run, and you just gotta, you gotta lock up your man and you gotta execute.
Of course.
But there's a lot of times too, also where he doesn't put us in those bad positions, but we can still go out there and execute and be able to get the job done. So it's been, like I said, it's been fun, man. I think the play calling has been excellent. And at the end of the day, when it's really time for that play to be made, the type of guys that we have on defense, we don't care what the call is. We don't, the DBs, the corners, safety, we don't care if we're left on islands. We just focused on making the last play and, being able to get off the field. So I think that's the great thing about, playing with these guys, man. It's been super, super fun. I can't even really express it enough. But it's been really fun, and it's easy to go out there and play when you got the level of talent and the level of the amount of playmakers that we have on our defense. Is so easy to just go out there and just play.
It seems like he saves the stuff for the big moments. You mentioned making big plays in big spots, right? And like, you didn't blitz Aaron Rodgers a ton, but here comes the blitz zero when you were 4th and 1 in the red zone. Guys can't get behind you there because the end zone's there, right? You got the end line. So that's when you could be more aggressive. Do you sense that he has a good sense of timing to save the stuff that you guys really think during the week is going to work for those biggest spots in the red zone and on third down?
Yeah, for sure. He does a great job of dialing it up. He obviously, like, everything is calculated. And obviously I think, that happens in games where, he sometimes saves, some of the good stuff. And like I said, when it's time to, make that play, we kind of already know what's coming. We already know the play that's coming. So we already, like, mentally, we have already prepared for that. And we know, because we've talked about it, and we know what he wants, and he knows, what we want. So it's a mutual thing. We work together. We work as a unit. And yeah.
No, it's awesome, man. You mentioned the green dot. What's that been like? Has it been fun? Has that something you ever did before? Like, how has it been?
Yes, I mean, I've never done it in the league. I did a little bit in college, obviously. But it's been really fun. It's a hell of an honor, hell of a responsibility, but it's been super fun. I had to adjust to it the first couple of weeks because I didn't realize how loud and you kind of gotta calculate what you put your energy toward. You got to figure out a way to be able to get the communication out to everybody without wasting all of your energy. So it's been a growing process for me. But like I said, I got guys out there that have done a hell of a job of helping me, be able to get the calls out. So it's not just me. We got a group of guys that have helped me along the way, and made it so I didn't just feel like it was I was the only one that had to get the call out. So like I said, it's been fun, man. These guys, man, I love these guys, and I hope I can continue to be able to lead them and keep doing what I'm doing, and they're helping me along the way. So it's been fun.
I imagine Julian's one of those guys, right? You guys just seem like the perfect tag team back there. You're both are kind of, you're young players, but you're so serious and you're so intelligent about the game. It seems like it would just be a situation where you guys really work well back there together. How much has he helped you kind of execute all those responsibilities?
Yeah, he's done a great job, man. It's been super fun playing with you. That obviously that's my guy. So, we play really well together. We work well off each other, and we've been playing with each other now for a little minute. So we kind of know each other's tendencies, and it's easy. Like sometimes we don't even have to talk to each other out on the field. We kind of just already know what one another's gonna do, just because we've created that bond within each other. But he's helped me a lot, man. I think we've helped each other, even not just the cause, but just getting better as a player. Going out there on the field, and we helping each other with releases, or helping each other with tackling, or even when it comes to the film stuff. Just trading ideas back and forth with each other, and it's been fun. It's been fun for both of us.
All right, I got to ask about the opponent real quick. You have a lot of experience against Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne from college. Give Giant fans an idea of what you guys are preparing for and how those guys can give you potential difficulties on Sunday.
Yeah, well, I think both of them are dynamic players. They both are able to make obviously big plays. I got to play Trevor when he was a freshman in college, and he was really, really, really good. We didn't get the the good side of that game, but obviously they're both really good players. Etienne is a really good back. He's very dynamic. He's really explosive, and he's a playmaker out in the open space. So it's definitely going to be another challenge for us as a defense, as a unit. But we're preparing during the week, and we're just trying to take it one day at a time and one step at a time, and be able to try to go 1-0 this week.
Have you burned the Tennessee hat yet?
Oh yeah, I threw that away. I threw that to the dumpster, so that's in the trash.
Zay, good stuff, man. Congratulations, and look forward to watching you on Sunday. Best of luck.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Fans, don't miss Giants football at MetLife Stadium. Limited tickets are available for all remaining home games, including a big-time matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles in December. Visit Giants.com/tickets to find your seat and go to a game this season and enjoy yourself at MetLife Stadium. It's been a great atmosphere. Fans have done a great job. We thank Xavier McKinney for joining us. Now let's turn our attention to an in-depth look and preview of the Giants' opponent this week, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Is Mike DiRocco. He covers them for ESPN. He chats with our very own Lance Medow and Paul Dottino.
The Giants began a 2-game road trip prior to their bye week as they visit the Jacksonville Jaguars this Sunday. To get more into this week's opponent, we are joined by ESPN's NFL Nation reporter for the Jags, Mike DiRocco. Mike, you got Lance Medow and Paul Dottino here on Giants.com. Appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
It's doing well. How about you guys up there in New York?
We are doing very well indeed, and we're looking forward to this week's game, a battle between two teams, Mike, and this is where I want to start, that I feel are somewhat similar because the Giants have played 6 games that have been decided by one score. The ball has bounced their way. They've won 5 of those games. Jaguars, outside of the 2 lopsided wins, their 4 losses have all been decided by one score, and if you look at all those games, it's either been tied or the Jags have led fairly late in the game. So what's been the biggest difference maker as to why the Jags haven't been able to close out those games compared to the Giants being able to accomplish that feat?
Well, quite simply, it's guys making plays at the end of games to kind of close it out. Last week is a perfect example. The Jags, put together a 10-minute drive in the fourth quarter. Trevor Lawrence plays some really good football, makes a couple of really key throws, including a tough one on a 3rd and 13 to convert on that drive. It takes, I think it was 18 plays, 10 minutes, and then they go ahead and take the lead. And then the defense allows Matt Ryan to just drive straight down the field, dinking and dunking to take the lead. There was a roughing the passer penalty included in there. And then Shaq Griffin, who had a rough day, just gets flat out beat one-on-one down the sideline by Alec Pierce. And it's a touchdown, and the Jags then go ahead and lose the game. And it's been stuff like that, like every single week. Against the Eagles, they still had a chance despite turning the ball over 5 times. And, Jawan Taylor, the right tackle, just gets bull rushed, and the ball gets slapped right out of Trevor Lawrence's hands pretty much as soon as he got into his drop there. Game over. So they're just not making those plays at the end of games that finish them.
There's a pair of numbers that don't make a lot of sense to me. Jacksonville, 23rd in red zone defense, but yet they are the 3rd best rush defense in the National Football League. Those two things usually do not coincide. Why is that happening?
Well, part of it is the first 2 weeks of the year, they were really good against the run. They were giving up 55 yards a game. So then they go into Philadelphia, and Foley Fatukasi gets hurt in that game. But even though that the nose tackle, plays a big role in it, they still give up 210 yards on the ground. And that's just ridiculous. They go ahead and then they play Damian Pierce. Foley Fatukasi doesn't play in that game against the Texans. And, he rushes for over 100 yards. Last week, Matt Ryan threw it 58 times. So they didn't even bother trying to run the ball because they had injuries to Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. They didn't even bother with it. So I think those kind of things balance out a little bit. And in reality, the Jags are probably a middle-of-the-pack run defense. They're certainly not as good as they were the first 2 weeks throughout the whole rest of the season. But, the injury to Foley Fatukasi was a huge factor. I think he's going to play this week. But it was really, last week was sort of the one that kind of threw it out of whack as well.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up the fact that Matt Ryan attempted 58 passes. When I looked at that, it really jumped off the page because once again, you figure, well, why would you want to put the ball in harm's way that many times, especially since Matt Ryan's been sacked a lot and he has been intercepted a few times, yet they decided, to your point, without their starting running backs. However, you look at the Giants passing attack, the numbers have been very modest, is one way to put it. So what do you think the Jaguars' identity is on defense? Is it pretty much still leaning on that run defense despite the down game against Philadelphia, or are they comfortable playing different styles despite the fact that the secondary has been very up and down?
Yeah, the thing of it is after the first 3 games, I would have told you that the Jags' defensive identity is a team that's a ball-hawking defense. I mean, they had 8 turnovers in the first 3 games. They forced just 1 in the last 3. In that secondary, the corners haven't been as good as we had thought they might be. And Shaquille Griffin's not had a great year. Last week, the Colts got the ball out quick. I mean, he dropped, like I said, 58 passes he threw. He got hit 7 times, didn't sack him once. In week 2, the Jags sacked him, I think, 5 times and picked him off 3. So they're just still searching for who they are. They've been so inconsistent. Last week, we saw this defense just absolutely get shredded by crossing patterns. They stayed man all day. They didn't make any adjustments, drop into any zones or anything like that. They felt like they could get to Matt Ryan, but he was getting the ball off so quick they just weren't able to get there. So, what is this team? Can they rush the passer? They were in the first 3 weeks, but they haven't the last 3. I don't think they really know what they are. I think I know what they want to be. They want to be a lot like that 17 team where they can get pressure with just the 4 guys and go ahead and play coverage in the back end and force some turnovers. And it looked like they may be headed that way. But now, honestly, I think they're just scrambling to figure out how they can really keep teams from feasting in the middle of the field, because that's really been where most of the damage has been done the last couple of weeks is in the pass game, is the middle of the field.
Based on the numbers, it looks like the Jags may stuff the box more than any other opponent the Giants have faced so far this year. But if they're not getting pass rush and their secondary is having some troubles, it seems to me if they overload against Barkley, now they're giving Daniel Jones a whole host of opportunities to do things.
Yeah, and they have to be careful about that because, Doug Peterson has experience playing Daniel Jones, who has ripped off a couple of big runs against the Eagles when Doug Peterson was coaching the Eagles. And that's the thing they're a little bit concerned about. I mean, the number one priority, obviously, is stopping Saquon Barkley. I mean, if you don't stop him, you have no chance of winning that game. And maybe stopping isn't the right word, limiting what. And that's going to be their top thing this week. But the bottom line, like you said, is don't get so concerned with that they're vulnerable in the pass game. And again, those corners, Tyson Campbell's had a solid year, but Shaq Griffin, who they signed last year as a free agent out of Seattle, has just really not had a good year. He gave up the winning touchdown last week. He was partly responsible for the game-winning touchdown in week 1 against the Commanders. Late in the fourth quarter, he gave up a long pass there. So those guys are vulnerable. That secondary is vulnerable. And what we've seen out of Trayvon Walker, the number 1 overall pick, has been, a really hot start in the first 2 weeks. And then since then, the biggest contributions he's made has been 2 roughing the passer penalties that extended drives in consecutive weeks that ended up in touchdowns. So he's got to start playing better. So if they're just going to load up on Barkley and then still not be able to get to Daniel Jones, then it could be a long day, and it could be one of those games that are not a 1-score loss.
We're talking with Mike DiRocco, who covers the Jaguars for ESPN. Mike, I want to piggyback off of your point about Trayvon Walker, because what you were alluding to is he had the sack in week 1. Since then, we haven't seen maybe those disrupting plays, but it seems as if he's still getting pressures, very similar to Kayvon Thibodeau, who the Giants drafted high in the first round, who has the 1 strip sack. But outside of that, he's been quiet. However, we're seeing that he's still creating opportunities for teammates and still getting pressures. So I know you just referenced the roughing the passer, but for individuals that haven't watched the Jaguars closely, what, if anything, is he doing to perhaps set up his teammates, which doesn't necessarily pop up in the box score on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, teams are, after those first 2 weeks, teams are looking at him a little bit differently. I mean, he's so raw as a pass rusher. That's probably his biggest weakness at this point. So he doesn't have a lot of moves. He doesn't have some counter moves developed where he can kind of figure out what to do if he is double teamed or what to do if he's played a certain way. Other teams have sort of rolled protections towards him a little bit at times. He's been chipped. And you would think with that would allow Josh Allen on the other side a little bit more room to operate, but it's really not been the case. Both of them have gotten good pressure, and I think Josh Allen's in the top 10 in the league in terms of getting pressures on the quarterback, but the sacks aren't there. And pressures are great, but again, it's what this team doesn't do. It doesn't finish. You've got to finish those plays.
Sure.
And in the first 2 weeks of the season, they finished. But they just haven't been able to do that the last, 3 or 4 weeks. And, Walker's been solid against the run, but to be honest, guys, you don't take a guy number 1 overall for him to be good against the run and get some pressures. He's got to get to the quarterback, and he's not doing it.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me what Jacksonville would like to do is control the narrative of this game with Robinson and Etienne running the ball, and then a lot of short stuff to Jones and Ingram, and then every once in a while seeing if they can get Kirk in open space. Is that about the size of it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, they want to get Kirk matched up in the middle of the field, on a linebacker if possible, a safety. They want to get him free. And, you mentioned the thing about Trevor Lawrence getting the ball out quickly, and that was something that the Jaguars really made an effort to do last week to kind of get him a little bit more confidence, because he had been, 5 turnovers against the Eagles and then 3 turnovers against the Texans. He needed a good game. And in order to get him going, they kind of had a lot of short stuff, a lot of quick stuff. And that's really where he's at his best right now, to be honest with you. So everything you said is spot on. And their hope is, like I said, they could get Christian Kirk matched up in the middle of the field against somebody that can't stay with them. I'm interested to see how they handle the run game, because Travis Etienne has been much more effective the last 2 weeks than James Robinson. But the problem is, they kind of go away from it a little bit, and Travis Etienne gets fewer touches as the game goes on, and it's sort of kind of confusing to us. But, again, they ran for 240 yards last week, so pretty much everybody touched the ball and had success. But, Etienne seems to be the more explosive back, the guy that can make a big play happen. And I think he needs to be more of the priority than James Robinson. But, they're going to try and pound it, like you said, and do that other stuff about clearing some stuff out with Jones and Ingram, and then try and get Kirk matched up.
And that would make sense, Mike, considering if the Giants have shown any issues on the defensive side of the ball, it has been defending the run, as we even saw last week with the Ravens. Is Kenyon Drake had a very strong game on the ground, multiple big runs, including a pair of 30-yarders. Speaking of the rushing attack, the other thing that has been brought to the forefront is that they haven't shied away from utilizing Trevor Lawrence's legs. He's got a pair of rushing touchdowns. The volume of runs, Mike, clearly is not high. I think he's run about 20 times, but it's the same debate that I think the Giants have entered with respect to their new coaching staff. How much do you want to expose your young quarterback to, considering he hasn't held up durability-wise? So what has been that fine line that Doug Peterson is walking about wanting to utilize Trevor Lawrence's mobility, but at the same time, to your point, you got those two running backs. It's not like you have to put much more on his shoulders other than pretty much focusing on protecting the ball and the passing game.
Yeah, it's been interesting because last year's staff, Urban Meyer wanted him to run early, and then they didn't want him to run after that. Doug Peterson has been pretty consistent in saying, look, use your legs when you have to. Scramble around out there. If nothing's there, instead of forcing something, go ahead and scramble and get yourself a couple of yards, get down so you don't get hurt, obviously. Last week they had more called runs for Trevor Lawrence. There was a third down run where he was, it looked like an option play at first, but Travis Etienne ended up being the lead blocker, and then he got around the edge and managed to first down. So we'll see a few of those. But, the bottom line is, like you said, they don't want to expose him to too much punishment, but they're going to try and be smart with the way they use it. He had the 2 rushing touchdowns last week. One was a quarterback sneak, he's been sort of reluctant to do that, to go ahead and take off when he's had the opportunity in terms of scrambling. But he said the other day, Wednesday, that, hey, look, that's something that I've done before. I did it in college. I have to be more comfortable doing it, and I need to do it more.
I got to ask you about this offensive line, because we know about the rushing prowess of this team. And you mentioned Lawrence trying to get the ball out quicker recently. Now they're going to go up against a Wink Martindale defense, which, to be honest with you, has shown 6 different philosophical tendencies in each of the Giants' 6 games so far. How much of a concern do you think Wink's kaleidoscope defense is going to be for these Jags to handle?
Oh, I think it's going to be a huge issue. Trevor Lawrence is a second-year quarterback. He hasn't seen everything. He's not even close, obviously. And you can kind of confuse the kid. And the interesting thing about Trevor Lawrence's numbers are, if you look at him, his quarterback rating, his completion percentage is actually better against the blitz than it is when he's not pressured. So that's sort of a weird twist of what's going on with him mentally this year. But look, the obvious thing you want to do is try and confuse the young quarterback. It wouldn't surprise me, and I know it wouldn't surprise the Jaguars, if they saw all 6 of those philosophies, approaches, whatever you want to call it, in the first half of this game at times. Because he's shown that he will. Trevor Lawrence got a big arm, one of the best arms in the National Football League. And he's a really confident kid. And he has shown the tendency to, it's 3rd and 7. I've got a guy at the sticks who's open, but boy, we got a big play down the field, and it's a tighter window, but I can get it in there. And he'll make that throw instead of taking the short throw. And he's still struggling with the concept at times of, just because I can make the throw doesn't mean I should make the throw. So what you want to do if you're a defense is you want to get Trevor Lawrence back into that mode of, yeah, that's a tighter window, but I've got the arm and the confidence that I can get it there, and make him take some more of those lower percentage throws. And I think if you do that, and I think if the Giants can do that, then the interceptions will be there, and they'll have a chance to, to kind of turn things over and get this offense to really start struggling. And if the Jaguars offense struggles, that's pretty much been the only thing that saved them the last couple of weeks.
Mike, speaking of the offensive line dynamics and the Jaguars' offensive philosophy, if you look at the trend here, Jaguars have won the 2 games where Trevor Lawrence wasn't sacked, and then in the other games, clearly he was sacked, but 8 of the 10 sacks that they've surrendered have only come in 2 games. So I guess my point is, I don't know how much there is to read into that. I'm just curious your perspective, because, I mean, it can't be so simple to say if the Giants get 1 sack in this game, they're absolutely going to win the contest. I mean, football, I understand sometimes it's relatively easy to understand, but I don't argue that that's exactly how it's going to play out. So how has the offensive line held up in your estimation? And why is it that when they've protected him, it seems to have triggered a win, and when maybe 1 or 2 sacks have occurred, all of a sudden the game has played out very differently?
Yeah, that's just I don't know if it's a weird statistical quirk or what, but like the thing of it is been, the interior of the line has been a little bit spotty other than Brandon Sheriff at right guard. The center's a rookie, and he had a rough go the first couple of weeks. Left guard Ben Barch has been up and down. Left tackle Cam Robinson has sort of, they paid the guy to be their starting left tackle for the next 3 to 4 years, and he's just been okay. And right tackle Juwan Taylor was playing the best football of his career until the Texans game, when he probably played one of the worst games of his career. Then he rebounds last week with one of the best games of his career against the Colts. And I think it's just been they've not all played great together at the same time in pass protection. And I think that's sort of the only way I can figure it out, is that there's been breakdowns here and there, in every single game, clearly. But, in the game against the Colts, for example, Juwan Taylor just got absolutely bull rushed and thrown around on 2 snaps in the entire game. And those were 2 snaps that happened to be where Trevor Lawrence got hit and fumbled because Juwan Taylor got blown up. So I just think the offensive line, I don't think is anything better than an average offensive line. I know the Jaguars feel a lot different, but when their breakdowns are occurring, it's just been at critical times as well. And they're just not all playing consistently. And I think that's sort of the best way to describe it, because there's really no rhyme or reason. How Juwan Taylor can play the worst game of his career and then turn around and play the best game of his career. That just sort of sums up this offensive line in a nutshell.
Final thoughts, a big picture one from me, and that is, the Giants have won 3 in a row, and they're 5-1, and a lot of emotions riding high, and so much optimism, and all that good stuff, all those intangibles. And then you look at Jacksonville having lost 3 in a row, and you wonder about what is their emotion? What are their intangibles right now? Are there doubts inside that locker room as to what's going on, what direction they're headed in? And yet, of course, Las Vegas has the Jags as the favorite, I guess, because they're the home team. How do you think that plays into this game at all?
Yeah, I don't get that line. I really don't. Everyone's like, well, the Giants aren't a great 5-1 team. Well, they're 5-1. This team's 2-4. They're not a good team. The Giants are a good team. That's the way I'm going to look at it until the game's over on Sunday. But I don't think there's a confidence issue or a confidence crisis in this Jaguars locker room, because there's a lot of guys on this team that were here last year and that were here 2 years before. And yeah, they've lost 4 games, but they've been in every single game in the fourth quarter, and they've been 1-score games. And that sounds terrible to sit there and go, oh, that's a good loss. But if you've watched this franchise the last decade, and certainly the last 2 years, I mean, they were getting their rear ends kicked week after week after week. I mean, they weren't even in games going into the second half. This is progress. This franchise has made progress. What they are right now is a functional NFL franchise on the field, and they haven't been that. So there are guys in this locker room that have been through some of the awful losses over the last 2, 3, 4 years that understand, hey, you know what? We're losing games, but we're a better franchise. We're a better team than we have been any time in recent memory since maybe 2017. So that, that doesn't sit there and imply that they're going, oh, we're losing games, we're fine with that. They're not, but they know that they're a better team than they have been, and they feel like, and any team, like if you lose one-score games and you lose a lot of them, any team is going to sit there and say, hey, look, one-score games, we could have won that game. 2 or 3 plays different, we could have maybe even, won that game easily. So that's sort of where they are right now. There's no confidence issue. Now, the problem becomes if we're into late November and we've still got, we're still seeing this team lose a bunch of those one-score games and they're losing them the same way, then things can start to get a little wonky a little bit, but not right now. They're okay right now, confidence-wise.
We're talking with Mike DiRocco, who covers the Jags for ESPN. Mike, not only is Doug Peterson a familiar face to the Giants, given the fact that he coached in the NFC East, but Evan Ingram, who played for the Giants, now on the Jaguars. I was very intrigued, Mike, when that happened this offseason because of Doug Peterson's track record utilizing tight ends in Philly, and a lot of talk about maybe Evan is more of a wide receiver than a tight end. You look at the numbers, he's been targeted. They haven't necessarily been overwhelming. It's been more Christian Kirk and maybe a little bit of Zay Jones and Marvin Jones when healthy. But what has the chemistry been like between Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram? And clearly a lot of people always talk about when a former player goes up against his old team that there's going to be a little bit more motivation, a little bit more pep in his step. What do you make of all of that entering this contest?
Well, during camp, I mean, I after watching those guys in camp, I mean, Evan Ingram was targeted all the time. And I sat there at the end of camp and thought, this guy's going to catch 50-plus balls and have 8 touchdowns. I drafted him in one of my fantasy leagues. I was like, absolutely. This guy's going to be, 50 catches, like I said, 8, 9, maybe even double-digit touchdowns because he looked for him in the red zone in camp all the time. It hasn't really materialized that much in the regular season. And we asked Evan Ingram and Trevor about it the other day, and their thing is like, look, we just kind of spread the ball around a little bit, and that kind of chemistry and takes a little bit of time to develop. The interesting thing to me is he's been better as a blocker than I expected, and obviously I didn't watch a ton of Giants games and zero in on Evan Ingram as a blocker. But
Sure.
my, opinion of him coming into is he was going to be, he's a split out wide tight end. And, if he can just get in the way of somebody, then, that's okay as a blocker. But he's been better than that. I do think that obviously we talked to Evan Wednesday, and there's a little bit of extra juice for him for this game for sure. Not any kind of hard feelings or anything like that. He said it's going to be fun. He knows most of the guys on the offense. So it'll be good to kind of catch up with those guys. But you can bet he wants to get in the end zone at least once in this game, wants to win this game. And I think maybe this will be one of those connections that by, mid-November will be a little bit better. But, he signed a 1-year, $9 million prove-it deal. So his numbers need to be a heck of a lot better than they are right now if he's going to be able to find a deal that'll pay him that much, whether here in Jacksonville or somewhere else next year.
Mike, before we let you go, another name that I think is worth bringing up, especially for Giants fans that may not be paying close attention to the Jaguars, is Jamal Agnew, who's played some wide receiver. And I know he dealt with a knee issue in the last game. So as we're talking with you right now, his status very much up in question. But the reason I'm bringing him up is he's known to be a special teams guy. He actually had a punt return against the Giants a few years ago when he was a member of the Lions. If he can't go, considering he's been the main punt and kickoff return man, how does that change the dynamics of what they do in the return game?
Yeah, you can't replace him. He's one of the better kickoff return guys, punt return guys in the NFL, that's for sure. I mean, he returned the missed field goal, 107 yards, I think, last year for a touchdown. Chris Claybrooks took over as the kickoff returner when Agnew went down last week, and he's one of the 2 or 3 fastest guys on the team, so he can really run. He's a reserve corner, so he'd probably handle that. At practice yesterday in the media viewing, there were a bunch of guys that were kind of working as punt returner, Chris Claybrooks as well, but Christian Kirk went back there and fielded some punts as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kirk would be a guy that they would try and put there as well if they're not real 100% sure that they want Claybrooks to do it. But, he's gotten more and more involved in the offense as the season's gone on, Agnew has. And, they love the speed. They kind of look at him a little bit like Travis Etienne is like, we've got to get him the ball in space and let him do his thing with his speed and, the way he's able to shake guys. But, it'll be a big loss if he's not able to go, because sometimes those, if you can make a play on special teams, and they really haven't at this point this year, that can really be one of those game-changing plays, especially when you're playing those one-score games like they have been.
It could shorten the field, change field position. There's no doubt about that. He is ESPN's NFL Nation reporter, Mike DiRocco, who covers the Jaguars. Mike, greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and we're looking forward to Sunday's game. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Oh, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
The Giants' official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV, brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. We thank Mike DiRocco. He's always good to us. He always does our mock drafts for us in March and April as well. Really knows the Jaguars well. We thank him for being a part of our Friday podcast. And now, as always, we wrap things up. Bob Papa has a chance to talk to the head coach of the New York Football Giants, Brian Daboll.
The Giants are in Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. As always, we're joined by the head coach of the New York Football Giants, Brian Daboll. And Coach, just kind of circle back to last week and sort of this pattern that has been established with your football team, just mentally tough. Last week they just battled, and it seems as if your team finds ways to win late in games. What do you attribute that to?
Well, the credit goes to the players. They play hard for 60 minutes, and I'd say the coach and staff does a good job of teaching them throughout the week. It's a collective effort, but those guys compete hard and don't let one bad play affect them. And early on part of the season, we've had some good results, but there's a lot of things to improve on, particularly trying not to get into those spots.
Coach, being in the New York metropolitan area and everything that goes on in sports, you're a big Rangers fan. The Yankees are in the playoffs and everything else. Your team's 5-1, but your players seem to really be handling the 5-1 record as perfectly as you would want them to. Do you get that sense that these guys really understand how to deal with this and how to make sure it's just we're worried about the next game, which happens to be the Jaguars?
Yeah, we try to do a good job of educating them on, how to deal with wins and how to deal with losses. And really the way to do that is just to focus on what you can control, which is the next day, the next practice, the next game. And that's all you really can do as a coach or a player. You can't get too caught up about, what behind you was or what's ahead of you. You really need to focus on what you need to do each day to improve. Again, this is a very tough, challenging league, and it can humble you really quick. So I think those guys understand that the next day, the next practice, that's what needs to be focused on.
Coach, coming into this game today, obviously, your running game has been outstanding this season, and it's been Saquon Barkley being brilliant and Daniel Jones contributing and everybody else having a role within the run game. This Jacksonville team is pretty good against the run. Miles Sanders is the only guy that clipped him for 100 this year. They're giving up 89 yards a game on the ground. What makes their run defense so effective?
Well, they got a lot of high-round picks that are playing well. Good talent up front, and then good talent in the back end with the support, the safety support, and the linebackers flow to the ball. Lloyd is a good young talented player that they selected. And, it's a challenging defense.
Yeah, Devin Lloyd, the inside backer out of Utah. And then, Trayvon Walker, who is the number 1 overall pick. He's got a sack on the season. Do they do a lot of things exotic, Coach, or is it, they're kind of a little straightforward and they just execute real well?
No, I think they do a good job of mixing it up. They play well fundamentally. And, again, they're a talented group. So we got our work cut out for us.
When you look at the way the NFL is, you sit there and maybe the Giant fan on the outside looks and says, look, Jacksonville, they're 2-4. But obviously, you as a coach in preparation for the game, you're looking at all the games. This is a team that could easily be a 4-2 or 5-1 team. They've been in just about every football game. Is that easier for you when you put that tape on, to get your team to be focused on, don't worry about their record. Here's what they do real well.
Yeah, I think that's what we try to do each week, regardless of who we're playing, is you don't focus on records or where you're playing. You focus on yourself and improving the things you can work on, and then you focus on their scheme and their players. And, every week is a challenge in the NFL. So I think focusing on, anything but that is a disservice.
They are the only team in the NFL that has 2 running backs that have over 300 yards rushing on the season. Travis Etienne, who missed last season, former first-round pick out of Clemson, and James Robinson, who's a third-year player who broke into the league as a free agent. And then you throw in Hasty last week, the former 49er, who rips off a 61-yarder. Talk a little bit about trying to slow down their run game.
Yeah, all 3 players are very talented, and they can take it to the distance anytime they touch the ball. So, with their front, I think their front does a good job. I think Coach Peterson does a good job of scheming different looks in the running game. And, they're very productive, I'd say good young players that are a threat anytime they touch the ball. So we're going to have to do a good job of, trying to control the line of scrimmage, getting good knockbacks, setting edges, and most importantly, they're going to hit some. We're going to have to tackle well in the open space.
Trevor Lawrence, in his second season in the National Football League, Coach, in the games that they've lost, the 4 losses they've had, he's been sacked 10 times. In the 2 wins, nobody laid a hand on him and sacked him. Just talk a little bit about your ball club and ways to generate pressure and, how to try to disrupt things for Trevor Lawrence, who is uber talented.
Yeah, again, one of our goals each week is to try to affect the quarterback as well as we can. And, it's not necessarily by a sack all the time. There's different ways to do that. And, I think Wink and all the defensive coaches do a good job each week of talking about that. But, the quarterback, Trevor, is a good player. I think he's got good feel in the pocket. He's got a good arm. He can make all the throws, and he's athletic. We're going to have to do a good job of staying in our coverage when he does escape and make plays on the run.
Coach, best of luck. Looking forward to the ball game as the Giants take on the Jaguars, and we'll do this again next week.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you.
That's Giants head coach Brian Daboll. We thank him for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast. We thank Mike DiRocco from ESPN and Xavier McKinney. And again, go back to that last episode on the Giants Huddle podcast feed. Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus. Great talk about some of the data surrounding the Giants' 5-1 start and how some of the young players are performing according to PFF's grading system. And of course, don't forget to go subscribe to the Draft Season podcast on its own separate podcast feed, the Giants app and podcast platforms everywhere. I'm John Schmeelk. Thank you for being with us on this Friday edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. We'll see you next time.